When making designer craftsman jewelry, whether using silver, gold, copper, or any other metal, it is important that you shape and fit your pieces of metal, demonstrating good craftsmanship to the best of your abilities. Generally, the parts of your jewelry should not have ragged, jagged, or uneven edges. Any sloppy craftsmanship not only affects the quality of your work, but can make your life difficult, especially when you start to solder. You will not be able to solder correctly without having well-shaped and good-fitting pieces of metal. To help you achieve this quality, the tool to use is the file. In this video, you will learn what is a file, the different cuts of files, and I'll demonstrate some tricks of the trade on how to use, clean, and maintain your files. I'm Greg Greenwood, and welcome to my studio. A file is a file is a file. Many students have uttered these words until later in their education they discovered there are many different types and shapes of files with different cuts to do a variety of jobs. Let's take a close look at some files, discover their secrets, learn correct techniques of filing, and choose some excellent files to get you started. This is your basic flat file. It has 4 parts to it. It has a point, working face, heel, and the tang. And the tang is the pointed part that goes into the file handles. I don't normally put handles on my files except for the large ones, and that's to help me keep a balance to the file. I like to get the feel of the metal and the file working together, so I don't use the file handles on any of the 6, 8, or even the 10-inch files. I like to just take and dip a little plastic coating onto the end. This protects my hands from the sharp edges of the file. You can wrap them with duct tape or masking tape, any type of protection that you want. And the handles can be a little bit expensive if you have quite a few files. So I just dip them in the plastic and I get a real nice feel and a good connection to the metal. If you do want to put on files handles, they're really easy to do. Make sure that in the end of the handle you have a hole that's large enough to slide onto the tang, and it should go at least halfway, if not 3/4 of the way, up into the tang. And you don't have to set it on the bench and start hammering on it or taking it and whacking it against the bench. You don't have to do that. Simply grab the handle with your hand and take a rawhide mallet and give it a few taps on the end of the handle, and that will tighten it up. And the more you tap, the further it'll go in and get tighter and tighter. The working faces of the file have little teeth or rows of cut teeth that are parallel with each other, and this is what's called a single cut file. You see up here there's an angle that the teeth come across the face, and I've got a little drawing here onto the file to show you the direction that they are. So there's parallel cut lines or teeth all along the entire working face of the file. This is a single cut file, and they are really great for smoothing out the metal, and they don't cut real fast, but they cut nice and smooth. Another type of file is the double cut. Now, the double cut has 2 rows of teeth that have been cut across the working face, and you can see up here at the top, here's one angle where it goes across, and then coming on down, here's a second row that are going across the file. And see if you can see it, it'll kind of make a checkerboard pattern. So this is a double cut file. It will cut faster than the single cut file, but it will be a little bit rougher. So there's a little compromise here where you want to cut really fast, but it'll be a bit rougher, and then you can switch to a single cut. Or you can use a double cut, and the cuts on here are of different coarseness. And so what we can do if we only have double cut files is we can use a coarser cut file and then move to a finer cut file, and then it'll smooth it out beautifully. No matter what type of file that you have, either a single cut file or a double cut file, the teeth on the file will have different grades of coarseness. They'll run from in the 0 range, which is really coarse, up until 6 or 8. Don't get too concerned about the numbers. Just know that the zeros are the coarse teeth up until the higher numbers are really fine. There's Swiss, German, and American grade files, and their numbers just vary slightly, but don't let that worry you. Just remember, coarseness, 0, fineness, higher numbers. The numbers on the files will be right above the tang. This is a number 2. Because I dip my files, the tangs in a plastic dip, sometimes they get covered up. So I just mark them with a permanent marker. That way I can see them a lot faster and a lot easier. There are many different shapes of files that are on the market, and it can be very confusing. I've made a chart with the most common shapes used in jewelry making and showed you cross sections of them to show you where the teeth are on the files. The most common is a flat file. It can have teeth on 4, 3, or 2 sides. If it's missing the teeth on one side, that's called the safe edge. And you can zoom in and file right up to other pieces of metal without filing those pieces of metal. It's really handy. So if you're going to be buying a flat file, make sure that you get one with a safe edge on it. If it has more than one safe edge or 2 safe edges on either side, it's called a pillar file. A square file has the teeth on all 4 sides. Round file, or sometimes it's called a rat tail file, and it's a round file that has the teeth all the way around it. And the half round file is really a neat file. It's a multi-purpose file because it has the curved surface and a flat surface. So it can get into inside curves or work on the outside curves or flat surfaces. So it's a really multi-purpose file and a really great file. The ring file is just a smaller version of the half-round file because it can get on the insides of rings and smaller little curved areas. Triangle or a 3-square file, these names are interchangeable. It's a triangular file with teeth on all 3 sides. The oval file, obviously it's an oval with teeth all the way around it. A knife file has got teeth on 2 sides, and it's a real thin file, and it can get into nice slotted areas. Really neat knife file. And the beret file is really a neat file because it has safe edges on the edges and the back, and it's tapered on in and nice and pointed. And so you can get into small areas without worrying about filing the other pieces of metal that are around it. So a great file. The beret file, make sure that you do get one of these. Now let's get down to the fun part, the actual filing of your projects. Just as a reminder, the files will only work or cut in one direction. When you hold on the handle or the tang side, you want to push the file away from you, and that's the direction that the teeth will cut. This is not a fingernail file where you file back and forth and it works in both directions. Only one direction when you push away from you. So you're going to be filing, lifting the file up, bringing it back, and then filing again. The file will have sharp edges on it, so you have to be careful with each piece that you're going to be filing. If we're going to be filing this flat surface here, I would not want to come across the metal and file this way because the edges will catch and make little marks, and you're going to be digging into the metal. So I want to at least come across the metal at a diagonal. And because it's a flat surface and a straight surface, I would really prefer to file lengthwise on the piece of sheet metal. This way it will get the smoothest and the flattest and the fastest way of making this edge nice and flat. So I'm going to hold it on my bench pin, nice and solid, and work lengthwise on it and push the file away, lift it back up, bring it back, and file straight across until it's nice and smooth. Now let's file the concave areas. I'm going to switch to a half round file where it's flat on one side and curved on the other. See if you can see that from this angle here. So instead of using the flat part, I'm going to use the curved part or the half round part of the file. And you'll see that the file is really only going to touch on one tiny little spot. So I've got to make sure that when I file across the metal, I'm not going to be just making little divots into it. I want to smooth this curve. The best way to do that is to take and start on one edge of the file, and as you're going across the metal, I'm going to turn the file and kind of rotate it so I'm working from one side to the other side and coming across the metal at a diagonal and curving it this way. So it's a nice smooth action, and I'm using the entire length of the file, but I'm curving it or twisting it along that nice concave surface. So this will hit all the highlights of that piece of sheet metal and smooth it out very quickly. Let's take a look at a wire, and I'm wanting to file the inside edge of the wire, and this would be like our sheet metal with the concave surface. So I'm going to choose the half round file again. And as you can see, it only touches on the one spot. So again, I'm going to use that same action, that going from one side of the file and twisting the file and rotating it as I go ahead and file through the piece of wire. So I'm going to start from one side and rotate it as I go through, and I'm not going to be coming straight across. I want to come at a diagonal to file that whole surface, and turning the file so it makes a nice smooth transition through that curve. Make sure that you keep your piece steady on the bench pin. You can put a pad on the bench pin if you wish, but keep it nice and steady and that nice flow through it. Now on the outside edge, if we're going to be filing this, I obviously wouldn't want to use the curved part of the file. I can use the flat section of the file. This is where that half round comes in really handy, because you can just flip the file over and then start filing on the outside edge. And again, don't file just on one spot. You want to rotate and move the file along the curve, so it's making a nice, smooth, long cut, and you're using the length of your file. You don't want to be just doing this type of filing in this large of an area. So like this, or you can switch to a flat file. This as long as you're using this little flat surface. And again, follow that curve with your file, and that will smooth it out beautifully. If we're going to be filing the flat edge on a wire, again, we would use the flat file, set it down on your bench pin, get it nice and firm on the bench pin, and then I'm going to be working the whole length of that wire and smoothing it out. From the forging, you get a little bit of unevenness there, so you can take your file and file that off very, very easily. Using the full length of the file, this will give you your maximum filing edge. And push it away, lift it up, bring it back, push down. You don't have to manhandle the files. The files are got the nice sharp teeth on them, and let them do the work. So you want to just push down there on there gently with just a little bit of force, and then that will smooth it all out. You want to do the edges of it, you can kind of round it out with the file. And you notice I'm not just doing one angle here, I'm kind of curving it around, and that will smooth that edge out. I can put it on the edge here, do it this way, but I'm always moving that file, not keeping it flat, because that will make flat edges. If I want to file the flat edge of a bezel cup, put it on your bench pin, use your flat file, set down, and go across the bezel, keeping it nice and flat. If you have some really weird little curves to get into, you can switch to your ring file, if it fits in here, and go ahead and start filing that, and you'll see that I'm kind of moving that through that whole curve, and I'm twisting the file as I go. I don't want to go straight across it, because that will give you little scallops. So I'm going to start up at this edge and run all the way through and twist the file as I go. Lift it up, and remember those teeth only work in one direction. If it gets a little bit too small in the area, you can switch on over to a needle file, a half round needle file, get in there and use the same action, not straight across, because you'll make those scallops. Kind of nice, smooth, curving action to your file. You will have a tendency to scrub with a needle file, and sometimes it's a little difficult to lift it up and then move it back again. So don't worry about scrubbing it a little bit with the needle files. As you're working on your projects and filing them, you're going to notice that your files will start filling up with little pieces of metal that are caught in those teeth. We want to clean those on out to make your file more efficient. The best way to do that is to use a file card. This is a file card that has a brush on one side and these little steel wires that are sticking up at a slight diagonal going backwards toward the handle. And these are the little guys that are going to get in those teeth and pull those pieces of metal out. What you want to do is look at the angle of your main tooth cut on the file, and then take the file card and start pulling it across at that angle. So make sure that your file is nice and secure on the bench, however it's comfortable for you, and then pull it only. This only works in one direction. You don't want to be scrubbing. You want to be pulling the file card across the file at this angle. Pull it across, and that will make those little wires get down into the teeth and pull those pieces of metal out. Then you can flip it over and use it at the same angle and get the brush and brush those pieces of metal out. Now your file is nice and clean, ready to file some more, and it will be very efficient. I know that's a lot of information to take in, especially when you're trying to figure out what types of files to purchase, what shapes, what cuts do I use. You don't have to be buying all the different types of files right at first, especially when you're trying to build up your tool collection. I like to keep it simple. So here's a few of the files that I would recommend for you to get started. The first file that I would recommend would be a flat file. Make sure that it has a safety edge on it. And second one would be a half round file, a ring file, a beret file, and a flat single cut file. And pick yourself up a set of needle files. You don't have to buy a big set, just one with 4 to 6 files in it is just fine. Also, it would be a good idea to get a card file. When you first start, you can start with one file of each of these, or if you want to get 2 files, then get a coarser file with a finer file. That way you kind of complement each other. Filing is a skill that you'll be able to develop whenever you file. You'll become much better over time with practice, and your pieces will become much smoother, more elegant. They'll fit properly, and you'll be able to solder much easier. I hope you've enjoyed this video on files and filing and techniques. Please subscribe and ring the bell below so you won't miss any of the future videos. I'm Greg Greenwood. Thanks for watching. See you next time.